the Artist as a Young Man, Chapter 2, Section 3. As you remember, here he's in a new school, he's in Belvedere, and he's going to develop personally. And his development is going to be incarnated in two things: his attitudes towards literature, as well as his attitude towards religion. Okay, so the section starts with Stephen in Belvedere. He's waiting to perform his role in a play. He's going to act out a major role. Uh, he was cast out for his stature and grave manners. So he has spent 2 years in Belvedere, and we were not told anything about these 2 years. What happened, what things, how changed, and we just have him waiting for his role. It was a crowded place, and he's starting to have anxiety. So he gets out of the place and walks in the garden next to the theater where he has to play, just to breathe air. And then two boys meet him, and they told him they tried to bully him. One of them, his name is Heron, and the other one, we don't know his name. So he meets them after he smells a strange odor coming from them. They were smoking, so they were hiding. So Huron called him. "Here comes the noble Daedalus!" cried a high, throaty voice. "Welcome to our trusty friend." This welcome ended in a soft peal of mirthless laughter. And "Here I am," said Stephen, halting and glancing from Heron to his friend. Vincent Heron, Heron is a name of a bird, and he is the head bully that bullies Stephen in Belvedere. So this is one of the incidents that he's going to be bullied, but we are going to see how Stephen respond to bully. Okay. They keep talking and about asking him, "Do you smoke? You don't smoke." But Heron knows everything about Stephen. Unlike his from Wallace, I think his name is. I don't remember. Yeah, Wallace. His name is Wallace. Heron is trying to tell him things about Stephen. So when Wallace asked him, "Do you smoke?" Stephen answered, "I don't smoke," answered Stephen. "No," said Heron. "Daedalus is a model youth. He doesn't smoke, he doesn't go to bazaars, and he doesn't flirt, and he doesn't damn anything or damn at all." Stephen shook his head and smiled in his rival's flushed and mobile face. "Peaked like a bird." Now here, the bird imagery is very important because he's comparing heron to a bird. This description is important. He had often thought it strange that Vincent Heron had a bird's face as well as a bird's name. A shock of pale hair lay on the forehead like a ruffled crust. The forehead was narrow and bony, and a thin hooked nose stood out between the closest prominent eyes, which were light and unimpressive. The rivals were school friends. They sat together in class, knelt together in the chapel, talked together after beads over their lunches. As the fellows in number one were undistinguished dullards, Stephen and Heron had been during the year the virtual heads of school. It was they who went up to the rector together to ask for free day or get a fellow off. This is important. First, the bird imagery. It shows you how Stephen looks at his bully. heroin. And then it gives you a piece of information how Stephen is at school. He's the head of the school now. Um, and he makes difference in the student's life. Okay, so they after he greets them and they told him, "Do you smoke?" He said, "No." They asked him, "You are a slay dog." Who? Why so? Said Stephen. "You'd think butter wouldn't melt in your mouth," said Heron. "But I'm afraid you're a slay dog. Might I ask? Might might I ask you what you're talking about?" says Stephen. "Indeed, you might." Here he is referring to the birthday girl that we don't know her name. It appears that she's here in the play. She came to see Stephen's performance, and she's sitting next to his father. And the bullies or the boys are bullying him about it, and they keep telling him that he's a slay dog because he has a girl who's encouraging him and she's cheering him up. "Indeed, you might," answered Heron. "We saw her, Wallace, didn't we? And she was pretty, inquisitive. And what part does Stephen take, Mr. Dedalus? And will Stephen not sing, Mr. Dedalus?" We've And he keeps on asking him about her. So the boys are impressed. They tell him that you have to admit you're a slay dog because you have a girlfriend. "So you may as well admit," Hiram went on, "that we've fairly found you out this time. You can't play the saint on me anymore. That's one sure five." Okay, this is important. Heron is telling him that you're not the saint. You're not as you want us to think you are. You're a sly dog, and we want you to admit it. You're not a saint. Stephen's moment of anger had already passed. He was neither flattered nor confused, but simply wished the banter to end. Why? Because simply uh, he has a role to play. He doesn't want to get into a fight. He wants just to get it over with. And I think he's personally happy because he has at least a girl who's looking at him, unlike the bullies. But the bullies did not like it. "Admit," repeated Heron, striking him again with his cane across the calf of the leg. The stroke was playful, but not so lightly given. Okay, here he feels the pain of the hit. So he began to recite the Confiteor. The Confiteor is a confession that Catholic make when they said, "I confess to Almighty God that I did so and so and so." So when they told him, "Admit, admit, admit," he started to recite his apologies and his confession. The episode ended well, for both Hearn and Wallace laughed indulgently. Okay, but the word "admit," the confession came only from Stephen's lips, and while they spoke the words, they, he means his lips spoke the words, a sudden memory had carried him to another scene called up, as if by magic. At the moment when he had noted the faint cruel dimples at the corners of her smile lips, and had felt the familiar stroke of the cane against his calf, and had heard the familiar word of "admit." Okay, so Heron told him to admit and kept repeating the word "admit, admit, admit." And that word, he has a very strong sensory reactions to all kind of senses, especially sound. And the sound of the word "admit" takes him to another scene 2 years ago. And that scene, he remembers even the sensation he felt, the hit of the cane on his calf. Okay, what happened 2 years ago? And where did he hear the word admit before? Now, he's taking you back in memory. We have a flashback. We are going 2 years when it was towards the close of his first term in college, when he was in number six. His sensitive nature was still smarting under the lashes of undivined and squalid way of life. His soul was still desecrated and cast down by the dull phenomenon of Dublin. Again, we have the negative feeling of Dublin. Okay. He had emerged from 2 years' spell of reverie to find himself in the midst of a new scene, every event and figure of which affected him intimately, disheartened him. Notice, disheartened him, filled him always with unrest, bitter thoughts. At the leisures which his school life left him was passed in the company. What he's saying that during his two first years in college, he spent his time in the company of who? In the company of writers. Okay, so he was escaping into literature. That's why he was fond of Tuesdays. Why on Tuesdays? Because every Tuesday he has essay class. And the essay was for him the chief labor of his week. And every Tuesday, as he marched from home to school, he read his fate. That's very beautiful. He reads his fate in the incidents on the way. So he can guess is going to be his day or it's not. For him, it's important that to be the first or not the first in the weekly essay. So on a certain Tuesday, the course of his triumphs was suddenly broken. Mr. Tate, the English master, pointed his finger at him and said bluntly, "This fella has heresy in his essay." You know heresy. Heresy means that they don't believe in God, for a person who doesn't believe in God or dares to defy the authority of God. So a hush fell on the class. Mr. Tate did not break it, but dug with his hands. Okay, he found the paper and uh, Stephen was confused. He was conscious of failure of his detection, and he thought that he might have a spelling mistake. But Mr. Tate said, "Perhaps you don't know that," he said. Where?" asked Stephen. Mr. Tate withdrew his delivering hand and spread out the essay. "Here, it's about the Creator and the soul. Er, mm, er, Without a possibility of ever approaching nearer. That's heresy," Stephen murmured. I meant without a possibility of ever reaching. Hmm. It was submission, and Mr. Tate, appeased, folded up the essay and passed it across to him and saying, "Aha! Ever reaching. That's another story." Okay. Here, the teacher is asked them for a homework, and that homework was to write about the individual's ability to reach the place of the Creator, God. And students are supposed to say that they cannot ever approach, reach, or get anything closer as being a creators because they are just the souls. So Stephen, in his essay, did not do that. He wrote ever approaching nearer. He gave a hint of possibility that the creator, that a person can be a creator through art because they can create worlds of their own just like God, and that's, it's heresy. Mr. Tate was keen on the word, so when Stephen changed the word with he replaced approaching with reaching, uh, he was satisfied. But the problem is the class was not. The student did not like that. Okay. So, uh, Mr. Tate calls out to Stephen for betraying a Catholic belief. And even though Stephen tries to explain that he meant to say without the possibility of reaching, this excuse did not satisfy Mr. Tate. Okay, so, and the students didn't like him too. That's why after class immediately, he was bullied by three boys, Heron, Boland, and Nash. They ran after him when he was going back home, and when they were in a lonely street, they told him, "Halt!" He turned and saw three boys of his own class coming towards him in the dusk. It was Huron who had called out, and he marched forward between his two attendants. He cleft the air before him with a thin cane. In time, to their steps. Boland is a friend. You see, he's just describing that Heron and his two boys were surrounding Stephen and walking around him. They kept asking about, talking about the great writers, who's the best writer, and this book is beautiful, and this style is excellent, until Nash declared that Captain Marriott, Mariette, I don't know him really, uh, was the greatest writer. Here we have the captain. He was a Royal Navy officer, a novelist, and acquaintance of Charles Dickens. Everyone knows Charles Dickens. He is famous for having an autobiographical novel, and the boys think he's the best writer. But, but here Heron asked, "Oh, fudge," asked Dedalus. "Who's the greatest writer, Dedalus?" For Dedalus, Stephen did not accept this as being bullied because he was enjoying the topic. It's about literature, arts, and books. Stephen noted the mockery in the question and said, "Hmm, of prose, do you mean?" "Yes. A Newman, I think." "Is it Cardinal and Newman?" asked Bolin. "Yes," answered Stephen. The grin broadened on Nash's freckled face as he turned to Stephen and said, "And do you like Cardinal and Newman, Douglas?" "Oh, many say that Newman has the best prose style," Heron said to the other two in explanation. "Of course, he's not a poet." Okay. Who was Cardinal Newman? Cardinal Newman was an English theologian, scholar, poet, Catholic priest. You see, he's the religious figure who writes. That's why they were surprised that Stephen like him as he's a religious man and he writes, because they are trying to bully him because they think he's a heretic. So he's supposed to like people who are like him. So they told him, "If you think that Cardinal Newman is the best in prose, who who is the best poet?" Heron asked Bolland. "Lord Tennyson, of course," answered Heron. "Oh yes, Lord Tennyson," said Nash. "We have all his poetry at home in book." At this, Stephen forgot the silent vows he had been making and burst out, "Tennyson, a Byron, a poet? Why, he's only a rhyme master." "Oh, get out," said Heron. "Everyone knows that Tennyson is the greatest poet." Okay, everyone of us knows who's Tennyson, but Stephen doesn't like him. He doesn't even think that he's a poet. He's just a rhyme master. And his vow of silence and not responding to bullies just broke because he's being hit on a sensitive nerve, which is literature and things that he loves. Tennyson is he's the most famous of and popular British poets, but who was his favorite? And who do you think is the greatest poet? Asked Poland, nagging his neighbor. Byron, of course, answered Stephen. Herring gave the lead, and all three joined in a scornful laugh. Okay, why are they laughing at him? Because he loves Lord Byron. Let's see. What are you laughing at? Asked Stephen. You said, Byron, the greatest poet. He's only a poet for uneducated people. He must be a fine poet, said Poland. Okay, here he is getting really infuriated and angry. So he started shouting. You may keep your mouth shut, said Stephen, turning on him boldly. All you know about poetry is what you write up on slates in the yard. Okay. He's insulting him. He's telling him, what do you know about poetry so you can judge who Byron is? Byron. The problem here, about Byron, although he's one of the greatest writers, he's regarded also for being a heretic, and you know why. And if you don't, just go and read. So, this is thrust put the two lieutenants to silent, but Huron went on. In any case, Byron was a heretic and immoral too. I don't care what he was, cried Stephen hotly. You don't care whether he was a heretic or not? Said Nash. What do you know about it? Shouted Stephen. You never read a line of anything in your life except on trance, or Bolland either. I know that Byron was a bad man, said Bolland. Here, catch hold of this heretic, Heron called out. In a moment, Stephen was a prisoner. Okay, here. The problem is that Byron was accused of being a heretic because of many things. First, because of his bad relationships, and just exactly the same as Parnell. The comparison is very unique that although they did great things, they were condemned for having, uh, you know, uh, bad characters or sinful characters in the eyes of the Catholic and religious men. So, since the school is highly religious, it teaches the children to be the same. So, the children here they know, they're not children anymore, I'm sorry. The boys here, they know that Byron is a heretic, and Stephen was called a heretic in a class. So, they are telling him that you are as a heretic as the poet that you like. So, uh, they told him, they present him, the three boys, and they were going to start to beat him. And Heron went on about heresy and your essays. They told him that you are a heretic, and we noticed that there is heresy in your essay. And they told him that we're going to tell on you, the teacher, we're going to tell Mr. Tate that you love Byron. He said, will you? Said Stephen. You'd be afraid to open your lips. Afraid? I? Afraid of your life? Okay, here he's accusing them of being afraid. So, behave yourself, cried Heron. So, they started to hit him, beat him, and they want him to admit that Byron was no good. No, admit. No, admit. No, no. At last, after a fury of plunges, he reached himself free. Okay, and the boys left him, laughing and jeering at him, while he, half blinded with tears, stumbled on, clenching his fist madly and sobbing. This is a flashback, as you remember. This is a development. and it's showing you his belief. He has a different personality. He's clear of the things that he loves and he hates. He stands for his favorite poet, although he's being beaten. He doesn't care. He doesn't admit. So we find personality development here is very important compared to what we saw in chapter one after being bullied. Okay, the problem is this is a flashback 2 years ago while he was still repeating the confiture amid the laughter of his hearers, and while the scene of that malignant episode were still passing sharply and swiftly before his mind, he wondered why he bore no malice now to those who had tormented him. He had not forgotten a whit of their cowardice. He didn't forget. Okay, and the cruelty, but the memory of it called forth no anger from him. All the descriptions of fierce love and hatred which he had met in books had seemed to him therefore unreal. Even that night, as he stumbled homewards along Jones Road, this is the road where he was bullied by those boys, he had felt that some power was divesting him out of that sudden woven anger as easily as a fruit is divested of its soft ripe peel. Beautiful imagery. He's saying he cannot get angry. He can't feel deep emotions like hate and love. And he's just wondering why he doesn't feel that. Okay, this is very, very, very important. The pursuit of phantoms. This this spirit of a quarrelsome comradeship, which he had observed lately in his rival, had not seduced Stephen from his habit of quiet obedience. He mistrusted the turbulence and doubted the sincerity of such comradeship, which seems to him sorry anticipation of manhood. The question of honor here raised was, like all such questions, trivial to him. Okay, now we are going to see what is the concept of manhood. He says that he knows that they're bullying him. It's part of their manhood. But for him, it's not being a man like that. And the problem is, there are lots of phantoms that are in his brain. Phantoms, I mean, voices and sounds are forcing him to do things and to be, sorry, a person that he's not. Let's see what are these phantoms and what are the roles that he have to take. While his mind had been pursuing its intangible phantoms and turning in irresolutions from such pursuit, he had heard about him the voices of his father and his master. What do they want him to be? Urging him to be a gentleman above all things, urging him to be a good Catholic above all things. His father and his teachers, they want him. His father wants him to be a gentleman. His masters wants him to be a good Catholic. Two phantoms, two roles. These voices had now come to be hollow sounding in his ears. When the gymnasium had been opened, he had heard another voice urging him to be strong and manly and healthy. And when the movement towards the national revival had begun, he felt the college yet have another voice he had bidden him to be true to his country and help to rise up her language and tradition. Okay, first, gentleman for his father. Second, Catholic for his masters. Third, he has to be strong, healthy, and manly. Where? In athletics, in the gymnasium. You remember? An athlete. Okay, in sports, I mean. The fourth, national revival. Why? They want him to be a leader in language and tradition. language, literature. Okay. In the profane world, as he foresaw, a worldly voice would bid him to raise his fallen father's status into labor. He wants to work to get money. Okay, this is the fifth voice. He has to labor, he has to work to get money for his family. The voice of his school comrades, okay, urged him to be decent fellow, to shield others from blame, or to beg them off, or to do his best to get the free days for school. Now the comrades, his teammates, his schoolmates, wants him to be a decent fellow and to postpone exams and do whatever things. Okay. And it was the din of all these hollow sounding voices that made him halt irresolutely in the pursuit of phantoms. He was pursuing all kind of phantoms, all of this. What does he want to be? A gentleman, a Catholic, a sport, an artist? What does he want to be? He gave them ear only for a time, but he was happy only when he was far from them, beyond their call, alone, alone in the company of fantastical comrades. Okay, so he performed in a very beautiful manner. Everyone was admiring him. He done an excellent job, but after immediately after his performance, the comparison is very beautiful because he feels like he has wings, and his character was wearing wings, as if he escaped from the labyrinth of his personality that was defining him. After the performance, he just wanted another adventure. Adventure ended as his performer ended. So he left the crowd, escaped his parents and everyone who knew him, and he was walking in the street of Dublin aimlessly alone until he reached a moment of calmness again. My heart is quite calm now. I will go back. So he goes back, and that's the end of section 3 in chapter 2. We end with a moment of stasis, as you remember. Thank you for your listening.